What is going on YouTube? I am Lamont at Large. Today we are in Laurel, Mississippi, a quaint little town here, population around 17 or 18,000 or so. Today we are here to talk about an interesting event that occurred here in 1951. Of course, that is of the execution of Willie McGee. It was the talk of the whole entire town. It was actually the talk of Mississippi and nationwide for a couple weeks during that time. And we're also going to try to answer a question. Was this man legally executed? Was he even guilty of the crime? Or was he just another victim of the traveling electric chair? Before I begin the video, I just want to preface it by saying this. Oftentimes, stories like this, especially when it comes to stories with racial undertones, information is not always going to be readily available online. And oftentimes when people write stories about such events that took place like this, they're going to write it in a way that they want you to read it in terms of what their narrative is. On all my videos, I try to never paint any kind of narrative. I always try to tell the story as middle of the road as I possibly can. If I make a mistake in the video, please leave a comment below. I am not a historian. Any video that I do, I always want you guys to check me if I'm wrong. If I get something wrong, I usually will pin it in the comments below. So let's begin. So Willie McGee was born in Pachuta, Mississippi. There's no birth date, but there is a birth year, 1916. Believe he had one sibling, mom and dad. Father was a laborer at some kind of a lumber mill, something along those lines. Eventually, Willie makes his way here to Laurel, Mississippi, and he meets a woman who I will later get into that story as well. And they have 4 children. Now, while Willie is out here, he works for a place called Laurel Wholesale Grocery. It is a grocery store, and he is a delivery driver for this place. So we're gonna go to maybe not November 1st or November 2nd, 1945. So a woman named Willette Hawkins, she goes into the sheriff's office here in Laurel and says, I want to report a crime. I've been sexually assaulted in my home. Okay, so the detective takes her to his office. She's with her husband, and they sit down, and he says, okay, explain what happened to you. So she says, a couple days ago, I was at home. I was with my children. She had 3 children at that time. And she said, I was with my husband, and our youngest was very sick, so we were up with her all night long, going into like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. My husband had just gotten off of work, and he was dog tired. So after hours of fussing with our baby, he says, okay, just go on ahead. I tell my husband, just go on ahead and go to sleep. I'll take care of the baby. He goes to the back room of the house, and he knocks out. He goes to sleep. So I'm with my baby in bed, and maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. And all of a sudden the door opens and I see somebody run at me. They put their hand over my mouth and they put a knife to my throat. And in so many words that I really can't say on this channel, he basically says, give up and he uses a vulgar profanity, give it up. He tells her, if you make any noise, I am going to slice your baby's neck wide open. So she doesn't scream or say anything. So over the next, she doesn't even know, could have been 5, could have been 10 minutes, he proceeds to rape her. While her husband is in the back room of the same house, maybe only 15 feet away, sleeping. After the assault occurs, he gets up and leaves, and he tells her, if you say anything about what happened, I'm gonna come back and cut your effing head off, is what he said. So after he leaves, she runs into the room, tells her husband what happened. They take her to the hospital, the infirmary, and that's where she stays for a while until she comes back here to report it to the sheriffs. Now, the detectives asked her, okay, can you describe the guy? And she says, all I know is he was black, because like when I grabbed his head, like I could feel his hair, that it was a black person's hair. And she says, okay. And the only other thing I can remember, because I really can't describe him other than he was a black man, maybe 5'8", 5'9", something like that, is that his breath reeked of some kind of liquor, like maybe whiskey or beer or just something like that. Okay, so now the police are looking for a black man in the Laurel, Mississippi area who's wanted for sexually assaulting this white woman. And back in those days, the crime of rape was a capital crime. It was punishable by the electric chair. And if you were black, you were pretty much guaranteed that if you got convicted of rape, you were going to get executed, especially if it was a white woman. So we're going to go ahead to maybe a few days later. So right at around November 3rd, 1945, Willie McGee, and it was either a friend of his or possibly a coworker, Willie had, he was a delivery driver, so he would deliver whatever product to whoever, and then he would take the money, take it back to his job, drop off the money. However, according to his job, Willie McGee went out for delivery and never came back. The employer is wondering what's going on. He didn't return. They call the police, and come to find out, Willie McGee, about 30 miles away in Hattiesburg, gets arrested, and he's charged with the theft from his job. He's charged with grand larceny. Apparently, he had not given them the money to a delivery that he made. He went ahead and bought some whiskey, picked up his friend, and they went joyriding around town in the groceries deliveries truck. They went around and hitting up gambling halls and just having a good old time, having a grand, fantastic time. So he gets arrested for that crime, and one of the detectives in Laurel comes to pick him up, and he's asking him about the crime and like why he did what he did. And I don't know, hey, I'm an alcoholic, I got a drinking problem, I'm this, I'm that, whatever he said. And the detective had spoken to the guy that was with Willie. I don't believe he was charged with anything because he was just basically joyriding, that's it. So he talks to the friend that was joyriding, and he says, like, what were you guys doing? He's like, oh, we went over here, we went to go shoot some dice, blah, blah, blah. And he notices in his story that one of the areas that they were in, like a gambling den, was very close to the scene of the crime where Willette Hawkins was sexually assaulted. So the detective goes back to Willie and he says, we have reason to believe that you're wanted for a sexually related crime. He says, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, do you know a woman by the name of Willette Hawkins? And at first he's reluctant, I imagine, to say anything, because back in those days, you just did not, basically the races didn't mix. And, they just did it, undercover, so to speak, in the shadows, what you will. So he denies knowing her, I'm sure, because that's not a good look. And then finally he just says, look, I know her. Yeah, I know her. I know her real good, as a matter of fact. we've been carrying on a love affair for like the last few years. And the police guy, sheriff's guy, detective guy, he's looking at Willie and he says, repeat what you said. And he said, me and Willette, we had an affair. I've been seeing her for a long time now. We would see each other when my wife was gone, when her husband was gone. Sometimes we would get rooms. Sometimes I go to her house. Sometimes she come to mine. Whatever it is, I'm just making up things that he could have possibly said. But he did say, and he was adamant, that they had a sexual relationship. Now, there's no transcripts of his police interview, but somehow or another, they don't believe him. And for the next, however many days, they grill this guy. Who knows what they did? Maybe they slapped him up a couple times. And then finally, he just says, okay, I raped her. That's it. At least according to them. I don't know. I wasn't there and neither were you. So who knows? But eventually he confesses like, no, I didn't know her. I raped her. Okay. Now, let's not forget what the penalty for, rape in Mississippi in the 40s and the 30s on all that is, and that's the death penalty, especially if you're black and the victim is white. So a trial takes place. Now, during the first trial, Willie McGee, there's no written record of him uttering anything during any of the trials, because this guy has had 3 trials. The first one, I believe the Mississippi State Supreme Court had overturned it because they said that he didn't get a fair trial. And let's not forget, I didn't mention this, but basically for his 3 trials, all of the jurors were white, except for the last one. A couple of them that were alternates were black, but they didn't make it onto the jury, the 12 jurors. So for the next 5.5 years, this guy has bounced around from courthouse to courthouse, from Jackson to Laurel. He's under intense security. You have the National Guard coming to protect this guy because this guy's case has everybody like outraged. First of all, it's basically a white woman's word versus a black man's word. There's no DNA evidence. And she says that, oh yeah, no, maybe it was him. Maybe she picked him up out of a lineup. Who knows? It's not easy to get a lot of these, transcripts and court records and stuff like that. The way I travel and I go from city to city, state to state, I'll drive 300 miles in a day if I need to. And oftentimes it's just, there's no records readily available online. But she did testify during one of the trials about what she went through and what happened. And I'm sure his defense, his attorney, who Bella Abzug was, I believe, one of his attorneys or his lead attorney during, all of the different trials. I'm sure she examined Willette. Are you sure it was him? Basically at the end of the day, she's going on just like, yeah, that's him. I recognize him. Yeah, that's definitely him. Yep, that's him. So did you have a sexual relationship with Willie McGee? She's like, oh, no, I'm married. What are you, crazy? No, he raped me. Or whatever it is, and however which way she said it. I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's like to be raped. I can't even imagine the pain and the agony and the shame of such a crime being committed. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm a woman, because guess what? I'm not. A lot of people pretend nowadays, but they're not. I'm not a woman. So I don't know if she honestly was telling the truth or Willie McGee was telling the truth. But to steal money from your job and go gallivanting around town, which that is true, that kind of shows your character's not the best. But again, that does not mean you're a rapist. It just means that your character is flawed. So Over the next few years, 5.5 years, 3 trials, a couple of them being overturned. Each trial ends with him being found guilty of the crime of rape and being sentenced to die via Mississippi's traveling electric chair. The Mississippi State Supreme Court overturns it. They have another trial. He's found guilty again. They overturn it, so forth and so on. But eventually, for the third and final trial, he was found guilty of the crime and was sentenced to die via electric chair, the traveling electric chair. And this is as best as I can find, this is the courthouse where the execution took place. And this would be the courthouse where one of the trials took place, but I believe it might have been the first trial, and then they won basically a change of venue. So they had another trial, possibly, somewhere else. Again, records for these cases, different articles, they totally say different things. This building looks pretty old. The other county courthouse here in Jones County is a lot smaller than this one. And mind you, on the date of his execution, there was about at least 1,000 to 1,500 people all up and down these streets. I mean, this was the public square on that day. And, there was people ready to, not liking this guy for, number one, supposedly you rape somebody. Number two, hey, black people that, rape white people aren't very popular. And also another thing that made him unpopular was that his attorney, Bella Abzug, was I guess she was brought on by the CRC, which stood for the Civil Rights Congress. They were I guess you could say a communist-leaning civil rights organization. And guess what? During the 40s and the 50s, guess who's not popular in America? Communists. So you had 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strike against Willie McGee. And through all those trials, even though he did not say that he didn't say anything, he didn't say a word in his own, defense. I guess they told him it's better for you not to speak. He had always denied this crime and said that pretty much there was a consensual relationship. Now let's go into this courthouse here, and I'm going to see if we could try to find what courtroom or what area the execution could have possibly taken place in. This place doesn't look too big, so let's go on ahead and jump inside. This is the inside of the building where over the next 5.5 years, Willie McGee fought for his life through 3 trials, finally being found guilty and sentenced to die in 1951. Now, I'm not exactly sure what room the execution took place, but of course it could have been in that one. I mean, who knows? You got some of the judges that worked here at the time. Yeah, who really knows what room the execution actually took place in? I want to say the execution took place in the same courtroom where the trial took place, but I'm not really sure. But I definitely have passed through one of the areas of the courthouse where a man could have possibly been wrongfully executed. just to make sure, I stopped in the clerk's office because I didn't want to guess. I wanted to find out exactly where the trial took place. And she did confirm to me, right behind me, right here, is where Willie McGee went on trial for the rape of Willette. And this would have been the room where he was executed at, right there. That is absolutely, I mean, amazing, but it's odd at the same time. Wow. All right. Let's get out of here before I see another courtroom, if you know what I'm saying. A part of this story that not many people know about is on May 8th, 1951. Willie McGee is set to be strapped to the traveling electric chair and have 2,300 volts of electricity course through his body. So Paul Schwarzenegger, who was the prosecuting attorney in all three trials, he is the man that put Willie McGee in the electric chair, goes into his kitchen and grabs a bottle of bourbon. He heads down to the jail. Can you imagine? There's all kinds of newspaper reporters, radio reporters, television reporters, National Guard, people like just there, amongst the 1,500 onlookers, right? So Paul Schwarzenegger goes into the jail and tells the jailers that he wants to meet with Willie McGee alone, mano y mano. They grab Willie McGee, they put him in a room with Paul Schwarzenegger, and they start talking. Now, Willie McGee is sitting next to the man that is responsible for him being put to death any minute now. So Schwarzenegger asked McGee, after some small talk, he says, listen, it's just me and you right now. Tell me the honest to God truth. No BS, no stories. I want to hear the truth. On that night, did you have sex with Willette Hawkins? Willie McGee looks up at Schwarzenegger and he says, yes, I did. Looked him right in his eyes. But he also said, she wanted it just as bad as I did. And whatever words that were said between them, who knows? Who knows? But the grave of Paul Schwarzenegger, the man who was ultimately responsible for Willie McGee getting the electric chair, is right here. Let's just say that Willie McGee was guilty. I wonder if this guy really thought that he should have been executed for rape. Or was he just simply doing his job? Dead men tell no tales. This is the grave of Willette Hawkins. She is the woman that was the victim in this case. And she's buried next to her husband, Troy. And wow, he died 1 week after she did. Wow. I I don't know what I could add to this part of the video, because when you boil it down, this case is simply her word versus his. Who knows? But rest in peace to Troy and Willette Hawkins. Okay, we have one final trip to take before we conclude the video. This is the final stop of our tour. This is the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church Cemetery here in Pachuta, Mississippi. And this is the exact cemetery where, after his May 8th, 1951 execution, Willie McGee was laid to rest. Now, of course, this case received pretty much worldwide media attention in one way or another. And you had quite a few known people, including Josephine Baker and even Albert Einstein, calling for this execution to be called off. Now, of course, he was buried here in an unmarked grave. I'm pretty sure the family did not want a marked grave in fear of people coming out here to vandalize it. You got some McGees right here. McGee is a well-known name here in this part of Mississippi. You have some other McGee graves over there, right in the middle of your screen. And you have a rather old McGee grave right here. Mrs. Elizabeth McGee, born in 1895, and she passed in 55. So he's gonna have an unmarked grave. I don't know where he would be buried in the cemetery. There's absolutely no clue. I haven't seen any stones that would, be like a cross or anything like that. More times than not, when people are buried under, unusual circumstances such as this, they tend to be buried kind of like away from other people on the, outer stretches of the cemetery. And there's just absolutely no clue about where he could be located at all in this cemetery, but he definitely is here without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, he could be in that corner. There's a couple unmarked graves over there. Who knows? I want to read a letter that Willie McGee wrote his wife before his execution. Quote, "Tell the people the real reason they are going to take my life is to keep the Negro down. They can't do this if you and the children keep on fighting. Never forget to tell them why they killed their daddy. I know you won't fail me. Tell the people to keep on fighting. Yours truly, your true husband, Willie McGee." Now, I want to talk briefly before I end the video about an odd situation with his wife. Now, it says online that he was married to a woman named Eliza or Eliza, one of those. And there was a woman named Rosalie McGee who claimed to be his wife, and she was going around the country doing speaking engagements and showing up at protests and what have you. The only problem with that is it appears that that really wasn't his wife. Maybe that was a paid actress, or what we nowadays call a crisis actress. I don't know. I don't know, because a lot of information about this story is just not readily available, but it appears that she really wasn't his wife. Let's not forget, guys, that you have a woman who is married to this man and has 4 children. And regardless of the fact that he committed the crime or he didn't commit the crime, he still admitted to supposedly having an affair with her for years. So do you think that a woman who is with a man who, has a penchant to, kind of drink, let's look at the facts here. Willie McGee was a pretty good looking guy. Maybe he was stepping out on her, doing this, doing that. That is not to besmirch his name. Just saying, from what I've read, could have been going around. Who knows? Who knows? That is not my intention. I'm just saying this. Isn't it kind of funny that his real wife hasn't really showed her face, or I can't even find a newspaper interview. You can find little blurbs about this Rosalie McGee, but you can't find anything about his wife. The only thing I've seen about his wife online is that after his execution, she took her 4 children and they moved to Las Vegas. I guess Las Vegas would be definitely a upgrade over Mississippi all day long. And I find Las Vegas a very odd place for someone to move to, considering back in those days, it was really just a stretch of desert with some casinos. But that's what it says. They moved to Las Vegas. And I don't know. At the end of the day, with this story, there's just not a whole lot of information that I could really base Willie McGee's character on, other than him going out on a bender, stealing the money from his job and drinking all that whiskey and doing whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. It just means that you showed a bad choice in judgment, right? But when you break this case down, you had a jury that only took 2.5 minutes to find him guilty, and all of the trials, all the jurors were all white. And like I said, back in those days in Mississippi, all kinds of bad for somebody black being accused of a crime, especially a crime against a white person. And some would say even now it's still a little janky out here in Mississippi. Definitely not a state that I would maybe settle down in. I don't know. I have my own thoughts and opinions about Mississippi, some good, some not so good. So anyways, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Is he guilty? Is he not guilty? And let's say he was guilty. Let's say he was guilty and he committed that crime. Does he deserve to be executed? I don't believe any state in the nation has rape as a capital punishment, but don't quote me on that, because I want to say there was a story in the early 2000s about a rape happening in North Carolina where somebody was sentenced to death. But anyways, if you guys want, go look that up. Anytime I do a video, please, I'm not a historian and I'm not the best researcher. I try to find what I can find, and I can only do so much by myself. But of course, I get a lot of help from my girl, the Scarlet Motive. So with that being said, I am hitting the road, guys. I will catch up with you later. Have a good one. Peace out.